Oh, so Doctor Who missing episode animations have had a pretty stop-and-start momentum over the years. Like, we had one in 2006 that everyone seems to like, at least in retrospect, but it didn't seem to go anywhere. Then we had a sudden spattering of them around the 50th anniversary, which, again, everyone seemed to generally like. Some were better than others, but whatever. And then they seemed to go away again. And then we had one in 2016, which I think was the first of the BBC America batch. And then we had Sharda, which isn't a missing episode animation per se, but shut up. But then starting from 2019, we had them pretty much consistently every year, thanks to the funding from BBC America. In this batch, we got animations for the Macra Terror, Evil of the Daleks, the Faceless Ones, Fury from the Deep, the Abominable Snowmen, Galaxy 4, the Web... But things seem to be going pretty well. Until the start of 2022, when we got some terrible news. News started circulating that BBC America had pulled their funding for the missing episode animations. And given that later that year they essentially confirmed that they had lost the rights to Doctor Who entirely in the handover to Mouse Ad, and Gary Russell himself saying at the Abominable Snowmen BFI that it was pretty much the last animation as far as he was aware, yeah, it seemed to be a premature end to the animations. And collectively, we as a fandom were like, no, Bestie Boo, you had something good going there. Why? But there was a small glimmer of hope, as the piping hot tea in the tabloids was that the BBC were actively seeking out more funding to continue these animations. And now, in August 2023, as of a couple of days ago, we've essentially had confirmation of that. The Underwater Menace, the partially missing third serial of the Patrick Troughton era, finally receiving an animation. The Underwater Menace has been long overdue an animation, ever since at least 2015. After the small spattering around the 50th anniversary with, the 10th Planet, the Ice Warriors, the Moon Base, BBC Worldwide were actively gearing up for a special DVD release of The Underwater Menace to capitalise on the fact that Episode 2 had recently been recovered a few years earlier. But the release ran into funding issues, was temporarily abandoned, and then finally came out in 2015, but with no animations. The missing episodes of the serial were represented by some of the worst excuses for reconstructions that have ever been seen. Like, just speaking from my own personal experience, the first time I watched The Underwater Menace Episode 1 reconstruction, you know that scene where the Doctor and companions are strapped down and are being lowered into the shark pool to be sacrificed to Amdo or whatever the god's name is? I genuinely couldn't tell that was what was happening, because the surviving telesnaps aren't especially clear, and there was no captions to describe the scene, so I honestly thought they were just restrained in an aquarium or something. They were terrible. So this animation project has been long overdue, as whenever I've wanted to marathon the whole Troughton era, this has always been a bit of a stumbling block towards the start, like, I have to watch those god-awful recons. Which is a shame, because The Underwater Menace itself as a story, okay, it's not one of the best Troughtons, and it is very daft, but I do think it's kind of underrated. An interesting musing on science versus religion. I know you'll probably say it's not that deep, but shut up, it is. And admittedly, these news/discussion type videos usually aren't my wheelhouse, they're more Nick's kind of thing. But as an amateur animator myself, I have spent pretty much all my spare time this year so far working on a special cartoon project for my own channel, and I am feeling especially burnt out after all that, so this is pretty much all I can think to do right now. So essentially, now that we've got The Underwater Menace receiving a missing episode animation, the question is open of, what else is coming? Well, we're gonna get the rest of the Second Doctor era. I mean, that's just a given. They're gonna do that. And that is a threat. But no, for real, the only Troughton-era stories left with missing content that hasn't been animated are The Highlanders, a 4-parter which they did consider doing, but opted to do the Macra Terror instead, The Wheel in Space, which they did animate a little bit of Episode 1 back in 2019 for some showcase or whatever, I can't remember, and The Space Pirates, which kinda desperately needs it, because it's no one's favourite Second Doctor story, and that's almost entirely because of how oof the recons can be to get through. I'd also love for them to redo the Web of Fear animation, because no one liked that. But of course I know I'm probably pushing my luck there, so, ignore me. As for Hartnell, that's an interesting one. If anything, it's probably going to be Season 3. I mean, the door has been opened by Galaxy 4, so keep going. Before this animation was announced, we kind of had that sinking feeling of, how in the Season 2 Blu-ray set they had to release the Crusade with reconstructions, and we were like, oh god, this is just going to be the case from now on, isn't it? But now this is happening. It doesn't have to be that way. That said, the Crusade, that's probably going to be a long way off. That's quite a hard one to bring to life. Same with Marco Polo. Probably same with the Daleks' master plan. But anything else in the Hartnell era seems to be fair game. I mean, the Celestial Toymaker will be a particularly relevant one to do, considering what we know of the 60th. Savages is up there, Mythmakers is up there, for better or for worse. And the Smugglers as well, that would make Ben very happy. And of course there's the Massacre, which Peter Purves himself said at the Galaxy 4 BFI he would most love to see brought to life in this kind of fashion. That said, historicals might be a bit of a hard sell. I know we had the Reign of Terror back in 2013, but notice how, at least in these batch funding eras of BBC America and this current one, hopefully, notice how we've not really had a pure historical. It's all been banking on, marketable aliens like Chomblies, Macra, Chameleons, Daleks, etc, etc. Hell, that's probably why it's especially surprising that they didn't do the Wheel in Space yet, because Cybermen. Boom. Put them on a cover, you've got sold out shelves. But pure historicals are pretty unconventional these days. I mean, if you want an example of that, just look at Series 11 delicately dipping its toe in the shallow end and then pulling right back out. So we'll have to see in that department, but anything with a big alien menace, I think that has a pretty good chance. One other detail to note is that, judging from the short clips we have of this project so far, it seems to be the same team that did Faceless One's Evil of the Daleks, Sharda, etc, etc. So we know that team's coming back, but will the Fury from the Deep Abominable Snowmen team return? And if so, what stories would they prioritise? Would they be put on Hartnell animations while this team stays on Troughton? Or would it be a mix and match like when Team A did Faceless Ones and Team B did Fury from the Deep? Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. The camera ran out of battery just as I was wrapping up the video, so here I am on my phone wrapping up the video. See you next time.